yeah, so it was sort of overwhelming, and I've done the complete life cycle, where I qualify it as the love, the hate, the equilibrium, then the slide, where maybe only you notice it's sliding, and then the descent, where it's sand through the fingers, and then the without. Or are you ever really without fame? Can you ever not be famous again?
Everyone thought Justine Bateman would become the next big movie star after Family Ties. Instead, she disappeared from Hollywood for years. The reason wasn't drugs or scandal. It was something much worse. Her agents made her a deal she couldn't accept. They wanted her to change part of herself just to keep working. She met with surgeons and thought about it seriously, but then she walked away from everything. What she said about that decision in 2021 started a revolution that's still changing Hollywood today. Justine Bateman was born on February 19, 1966 in Rye, New York. Her mother, Victoria, used to work as a flight attendant for Pan Am. She was born in Malta, but grew up in England, so their home had a British feeling to it. Her father, Kent Bateman, was deeply involved in the acting world. He worked as both an acting coach and a theatrical manager, which meant their house was always full of actors, scripts, and discussions about show business. It wasn't a normal childhood at all. Justine was only 2 years old when she was already hearing people practice lines and watching auditions happen in her living room. 4 years later, her little brother Jason was born, and he would also become famous. People in Hollywood would later call them a rare pair of siblings who both succeeded under the same roof, both shaped by that same chaotic and ambitious energy. By the time Justine turned 4, her life was already full of goodbyes. The family kept moving around, following her father's growing business. They lived in Salt Lake City for a while, then moved around California. She went to more elementary schools than most people attend in their entire lives, 5 different schools in 3 different states before she turned 12. All that moving did something to her. She had to become good at reading people quickly and learning how to fit in wherever they ended up living. Bateman, to that skill, was a child who never felt like she truly belonged anywhere. She had to keep changing herself just to survive, and that need to adapt later grew into perfectionism and a deep desire to stay in control of everything around her. Things at home were even more intense than school. Her father believed in strict training. By the time Justine was 8 years old, he had both her and Jason following daily routines. These weren't regular chores or homework. They were things like reading scripts, doing voice exercises, and attending networking events. Their dinner conversations weren't about cartoons or school drama. Instead, they talked about acting techniques and career moves. What made it worse was that Kent kept written records of everything. He would actually rate their appearance and confidence levels, then share that information with agents. He even timed their practice auditions and compared the 2 children to each other. Jason got his first big role on Little House on the Prairie when he was just 10 years old, which raised the expectations for Justine. She was only 12 and already carrying the weight of those expectations. The anxiety started right there. She couldn't afford to mess up because every move she made felt like a test she had to pass. Going to public school didn't make things easier. Most celebrity kids had private tutors, but her parents thought regular school would keep things more normal. Instead, it just made her life harder. Teachers treated her differently, and other students teased her. Some said her parents were fake, while others thought the family was just pretending to be normal. She missed birthday parties and sleepovers because other parents didn't want their kids getting too close to Hollywood people. In 4th grade, kids made fun of her by playing a mean game they called Hollywood Justine. They would copy her actions and laugh whenever she tried out for school plays. She learned to stay calm on the outside, but inside she felt like she never fit in anywhere. That feeling of not belonging followed her into adulthood. Even years later, in friendly settings, she often felt like she was just playing a role instead of being herself. When she turned 13, the family finally settled down in Los Angeles. They picked the San Fernando Valley so they would be close to auditions and events. Her father knew both kids were reaching the perfect age for teen TV roles, and he didn't want to waste any time. Within 6 months, Justine signed with the same agency as Jason. Industry people called it a sibling package deal, and that arrangement gave them both better chances during negotiations. Justine was now fully part of the game. In just her first 18 months in LA, she went to over 150 auditions. That number is shocking even by today's standards. Her father tracked every single one of them, keeping notes about what casting directors said, who the other actresses were, and what Justine needed to improve. Their house in Woodland Hills became like a workshop. Kent ran acting sessions from their living room, and Justine had to attend all of them, even though she was already a working actor. At 15 in 1981, she booked her first professional job. It was just a commercial, but it was her start. What people didn't see was how hard everything was behind the scenes. California had strict rules for young actors. She had to keep her grades up or she couldn't keep working. That meant she was always rushing around, filming a commercial, and then hurrying back to class. Most adults would have found it exhausting, but for Justine, it became normal. Every hour had to count, and she learned to manage her time like a professional, constantly balancing auditions and schoolwork. She attended Taft High School in Woodland Hills, where everyone knew she had talent, especially in drama class. But she didn't get to enjoy being a regular teenager. While other students were going to prom or football games, she would as on set or heading to auditions. Her teacher admired her natural stage presence, but most of her classmates hardly saw her around school. She gave up parties and weekends to chase something bigger. Even with all her talent, the path wasn't easy. Between 1980 and 1981, she faced rejection after rejection. She auditioned for several TV pilots but didn't land the roles. Hollywood can be cruel in that way. It wasn't always about talent. Sometimes casting directors said she was too tall, or didn't have the right hair color, or just wasn't the type they wanted. It was heartbreaking, because each no wasn't just about her dream. It also meant less income for the family. That same year, she finally got a small role on Little House on the Prairie, the same show her brother Jason had already made his mark on. Jason was just 12 but already had a regular part, while Justine, who was older, was still struggling to get noticed. But working on that show gave her real experience. She learned how to act in a historical time period, understanding how people moved and spoke back then, and being respectful of every little detail. She watched experienced stars like Michael Landon closely and picked up how to behave on set, how to adjust to different directors, and how to memorize scripts quickly. In 1982, Justine Bateman was just 16 when she landed the role of Mallory Keaton on NBC's Family Ties. At first, Mallory was supposed to be smart. That's how the writers originally wrote her. But during early test runs, people laughed more when Justine acted like Mallory was a bit clueless. The network saw this reaction and made a surprising decision. They rewrote the entire character, turning her into the typical dumb blonde type. It got laughs and made Mallory popular, but it also locked Justine into a role she didn't choose. The strange part was that in real life, Justine was incredibly smart. She even went on to get a computer science degree from UCLA later in life. But back then, the public only saw the silly version of her character. By 1984, Family Ties had become one of the biggest shows on television. In just 2 years, it went from being ignored to being ranked 5th in the country. Justine and Michael J. Fox had great chemistry on screen, and their scenes together pulled in millions of viewers. She started earning $10,000 for every episode, and over 7 seasons, she appeared in more than 170 episodes. But behind the scenes, things weren't as bright. The show kept using the same storylines over and over. Michael's character Alex would mess up and then apologize. That was the basic formula. Justine wanted more than that. She wanted deeper, more emotional stories for Mallory, but that never happened. As the focus of the show shifted toward Michael J. Fox and his character's rise to fame, Justine's character got pushed to the side. The show had started as a balanced family story, but it slowly became the Alex Show. Even the parents, played by Michael Gross and Meredith Baxter, had less important things to do. Justine's role got stuck in the same jokes about shopping, boyfriends, and being clueless. She felt frustrated because she wanted to stretch herself as an actress, but the scripts wouldn't let her. Fame hit hard during this time. Paparazzi followed her everywhere, and teen magazines wouldn't stop writing about her. She was only a teenager, but her every move was being watched. She later said the lack of privacy made her miserable. Winning awards didn't protect her from losing her sense of normal life. She was becoming famous and unhappy at the same time. During the show's peak years from 1985 to 1987, Justine kept showing up and filmed every single episode, but something was changing inside her. In 1986, she did something significant. At just 20 years old, she directed an episode of the show. It was rare, especially for a young woman in Hollywood. That small moment gave her a glimpse of what her future might hold, working behind the camera and making decisions. However, even with professional success, she was carrying hidden pain. Since the age of 16, Justine had been silently fighting eating disorders including anorexia, bulimia, and overeating. The pressure to look perfect was destroying her from the inside. She would sometimes run off set to make herself sick between scenes. Her weight was constantly criticized by magazines, and strangers judged her body. She once said her body image was horrible during those years. She was filming scenes while feeling dizzy from not eating, yet the world still saw her as Happy Mallory. When Family Ties ended in 1989 with a massive finale that over 36 million people watched, Justine gave a powerful goodbye performance. Fans praised her work, but the next day, the truth hit her hard. She was unemployed. She had just finished the biggest role of her life, and now casting directors only saw one thing when they looked at her: Mallory. That one role had become like a prison, and she was afraid that no one would ever give her a different chance. In 1990, she tried to change everything by taking a risk and starring in The Fatal Image, a dark thriller filmed in Paris. She played a woman who witnesses a murder and gets pulled into danger. It was nothing like Mallory, and she hoped people would see her differently. But even then, critics said they could still see bits of Mallory in her performance. The film didn't do well because viewers just couldn't let go of the old image they had of her. After that, things got worse. She went to auditions, but people wouldn't see past Mallory Keaton. Casting directors didn't care how good her acting was. They had labeled her as the dumb sister and wouldn't change their minds. One after another, projects slipped away from her. She spent a whole year trying out for shows that never got made. It felt like no one believed in her anymore because she had played the role too well. Hollywood thought that's who she really was. Then in the middle of the 1990s, her agents told her something shocking. If she wanted to keep working in Hollywood, they said she had to get plastic surgery. She had always aged naturally, but Hollywood didn't want that anymore. When she searched for herself online, the top suggestion was, "looks old." It crushed her spirit, and she started thinking maybe they were right. Maybe she did need to change her face to continue working. She thought about it seriously and even met with 3 different surgeons in Beverly Hills. But deep down, something didn't feel right about it. In the end, she walked away from those consultations. Years later, she wrote about this moment in her 2021 book, Face, 1 Square Foot of Skin, saying it was wrong how women were made to feel broken just for getting older. That moment changed her completely. She started to speak out, refusing to stay quiet while other women were told to erase themselves to stay relevant. By 1999, acting offers had nearly disappeared entirely. Justine didn't want to wait around anymore for someone to give her a chance. She used her savings from Family Ties and took control of her career. She started directing her own projects, investing her own money and hoping someone would care about her work. It wasn't easy, but for her, directing wasn't about fame anymore. It was about survival. If no one was going to give her a chance, she would create her own opportunities. Something surprising happened in January 2001 when she married Mark Fluent. He wasn't an actor or musician. He worked in real estate, managing huge properties for Deutsche Bank. They had met long ago in high school, but reconnected when Justine was going through one of the hardest times in her life. He was stable and kind, making over $500,000 a year. That financial security allowed her to step back from the madness of Hollywood. She didn't need to go to every audition or red carpet event anymore. For the first time in years, she could just breathe and live for herself instead of surviving for the cameras. In June 2002, their son Duke was born, and with him came a choice that shocked everyone in Hollywood. Justine said no to millions of dollars in offers between 2002 and 2004. She didn't want her child to grow up in the same spotlight that had nearly ruined her own life. She knew what it was like to be famous as a teenager, and she didn't want that experience for him. So she stepped away completely. For 2 full years, she turned down every offer, stayed home, avoided interviews, and kept her family away from the industry. She had been working non-stop since 1982, and this was her first real pause. Many people thought her career was over, but for her, it felt like a new beginning. In January 2004, her daughter Gianetta was born. But instead of joy, Justine fell into deep postpartum depression. For 8 long months, she barely recognized herself. She gained 40 pounds, couldn't sleep properly, and had panic attacks that made it impossible to leave her house. At the same time, her brother Justine Bateman was having a huge comeback with Arrested Development. While he was winning awards and being praised by critics, Justine was stuck in silence, trying to pull herself out of the darkness with therapy and medication. In 2012, something happened that no one expected. Justine Bateman, once the teenage star of Family Ties, walked into a classroom at UCLA. She was 46 years old, surrounded by students who were teenagers, most of them just starting their adult lives. But Justine wasn't there for fun or fame. She had signed up for a challenging degree in computer science and digital media. Her reason was simple. She wanted to prove she could do something completely new and challenging, something no one yet she could handle. Back in the 1980s, when she was playing Mallory Keaton, Paramount Studios had told her flat out that she wasn't allowed to go to college. "You're under contract," they had said. So she didn't go. But now, all these years later, she came back to do what she had been stopped from doing decades earlier. It wasn't easy at all. She struggled with learning difficulties and had to face students who looked at her like she didn't belong there. She sat in classrooms filled with kids half her age, and while they were just beginning their lives, Justine was completely rewriting hers. At the same time, she was still working in film and television, but every day she showed up to learn coding, take exams, and build something entirely new. In 2016, after 4 years of hard work, she graduated at age 50 with a real computer science degree. That moment silenced a lot of people who had doubted her abilities. While pursuing her degree, she continued working on creative projects. In 2015, she launched her own production company called Section 5. This wasn't just a place to make films. It was her way of mixing art and technology using everything she had learned. She started working on experimental short films and eventually created her first full-feature film, Violet, which premiered at SXSW in 2021. The story was deeply personal, dealing with fear, anxiety, and that quiet voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough. In 2018, she released a book called Fame, The Hijacking of Reality. It wasn't a feel-good story at all. It was raw and completely honest. She talked about panic attacks, about losing her identity, and about the strange way fame makes you feel invisible, even when everyone's watching you. Critics said it was one of the most honest books ever written by a former child star. Then came something even more personal. In 2021, she searched for her own name online and was hit with a suggestion. Justine Bateman looks old. She was 42 when it first happened, and it really hurt. But instead of hiding from it, she wrote a second book called Face, 1 Square Foot of Skin. She interviewed nearly 50 women about aging, beauty, and shame, and she told the world she refused to do anything to change her face, even if people didn't understand her choice. In 2023, she went on 60 Minutes Australia and said something that shocked everyone. "I just don't give a damn. I think I look rad." She talked about how she had considered surgery before, thinking about getting her eyelids done or having a lower facelift. But in the end, she decided against it. She said if she changed her face, she would lose her authority and authenticity. That moment went viral, with some people attacking her and others calling her brave. But she didn't back down. Her words turned into a movement. She wasn't just aging naturally, she was fighting for every woman who ever felt pressured to look younger just to feel worthy. Her work didn't stop there. Using her technology degree, she started fighting against something new: artificial intelligence in filmmaking. In 2023, she founded Credo 23, a group that demanded AI-free films. She believed AI would kill real art in Hollywood. During the Hollywood strikes, she showed up to the picket lines and helped SAG-AFTRA understand the dangers of AI, not just to actors, but to everyone who works behind the scenes. She even started the Credo 23 Film Festival, where no AI-generated content is allowed. By November 2024, She had seen enough of what Hollywood had become. She wrote a powerful piece for Fast Company, saying what others were too scared to say. She declared that Hollywood was dead, destroyed by streaming services and AI, with studios only caring about billion-dollar blockbusters while real storytelling had been sacrificed for money. Now at 59, Justine Bateman stands for something much bigger than just acting. She represents truth, authentic aging, and the power of starting over completely. She says every wrinkle on her face shows determination, creativity, and a life fully lived. When she walks into a room now, it's not about being young or pretty. It's about saying, "This is who I am, and I'm not going anywhere." And somehow, through everything she's been through, she's just getting started on the next chapter of her remarkable journey.